planning our schedule and everything, and we may be live because it is 1 minute before our official start time. And it starts the video early so that by the time the stream is actually showing up, it's on time. So you guys are seeing this a minute after I'm saying it, which is one of those weird things. I have such a fun time sometimes trying to understand time when I think about time and timelessness and God's timelessness and how that all works. That is for another time, but it is such a fun subject. The intricacies of things happening when they're not happening, but we see them when they do happen. That's a mystery for another time. And I'm saying time a lot, so I was trying to think of another word, and I couldn't think of another word, so I just had to say it again. I hope you guys are doing well. I don't have my video up yet. Hopefully it will get started soon, and I'll be able to follow along in the comments. Hey, as you guys are coming on, be sure to let us know where you're coming from. It has been a while since we've done a live. We didn't do one over the Christmas season. I think it's been like a month almost. Actually, it has been a month ago. I'm looking at my list of videos, and it has been a month since we did it. We are now live. This is great. So we had our holiday vacation. We took 2 weeks off and closed down the offices, took some time with our family, just some time to celebrate and enjoy that. It was really good. And now we got back, and I actually ended up being exposed to this virus that's been going around. I didn't go and have any tests or anything like that, so I have no idea if I actually got it, but I started dealing with some real strong fatigue and some body aches, and dealt with that for about 2 weeks, but doing a lot better. Still tired, but doing a lot better than what I was. So back in the offices and ready to get started again for this year, but really apologize for not being on here the last 2 weeks like the intent was. But with with the way that I was feeling, it's probably a good idea that I wasn't on the video. Who knows how that would have happened. So Lakeland, Florida, welcome, Lee. Glad you're here. We got Marilyn coming in. Welcome. Glad to have you. Glad you're able to join us. Hey, make sure that you share this video. Let people know about it. We're going to be talking about prophecy and how to deal with prophetic words when they're wrong. How to understand that, how to think through that, why that happens. We'll get into that a little bit more here in just a second. We got Kerrville, Kaylin. Welcome. Glad to have you on. Good to hear from you. Let's see. Somebody downloaded the Streams app yesterday. Welcome. Glad, or recently. It doesn't say yesterday, it says recently. Well, glad you're on, and good to have you with us. We got Maryland, got Toronto, Canada. Hey, that reminds me, if you haven't, I know some of you're watching on YouTube, some of you are watching on Facebook and the other places. I want to encourage you, come over to the YouTube channel. That's where we're able to actually monitor the comments while we're doing this live. We're only able to monitor one location of comments, so we're doing that on our YouTube channel. So move on over to our YouTube channel and you'll be able to put your comments. We'll be able to see them. I'll try to interact as I can as we're talking. If you haven't already, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you tell YouTube that you want notifications, they will let you know every time we go live, so you'll be able to jump on. This week, I'm going to be doing more of a teaching, but next week, we're going to be doing dream interpretation. So we'll be doing live dream interpretation, so you don't want to miss that. So make sure you tell YouTube that you want notifications, and they'll let you know when we go live. And we always try to put it on our app and put a notification on there so that you know about it. So if you have not seen our app yet, our app is a great way to get all of our resources that we've made available for free. We put up all of our blogs on there. We have a podcast on there, some different teachings that we've done at different times, and we're actually going to start putting up a podcast of our services that we've been doing on Sunday mornings at Streams Healing House. We've been doing church for almost a year now, and we're going to start putting up some of those messages as a podcast, so that'll be coming soon. And we do videos, a lot of different videos. Our Dream Lab episodes, we put up the older Dream Labs, our archives of the Dream Labs, after they've been available for our tribe for a year. Then we release them publicly, so you'll see them on there as well as here, our conversations. So lots of great resources that you can get on our app, and it's just a convenient way to stay in touch. We put up our events and what's going on. You can see where we're at and what's going on as we travel. So thank you so much. A couple people saying glad I'm feeling better, doing better. So am I. It was interesting. I am just really thankful it did not hit me like it's hit a number of people. I had a couple friends that have had it, and it was awful, but it was not that bad for me. So that is wonderful. We've got Sweden, we've got the UK, we've got Fort Worth, Texas. Welcome, Amy. Got Austin, Alberta, Canada, Toronto, Canada. Welcome, glad you're here. Let's see, Fife, Scotland. I love Scotland. It's one of my favorite places in the world. I actually get to connect with our team in Scotland a little bit later today. We'll be doing a Zoom and talking with them, so looking forward to that. Well, Maui, Hawaii. That's a fun place as well. Debbie, you're so welcome. Glad you like the app and glad you're able to get hold of those teachings. So thankful that we're able to make that available. It's astounding what we're able to do in today's day and age right now as far as staying connected and being able to do stuff. I can remember back, let's see, it had to have been in 2005. Around 2005, I was on staff at Streams when we were up in New Hampshire, and we're sitting around the table. We've got the leaders get together for a staff meeting, and John Paul was explaining how the Lord had shown him that times were coming where ministries that were going to stay relevant and we're going to even stay operating needed to be media-based ministries, that it was going to be more important than ever, and we needed to start figuring out how to get media-based and do more media stuff. And so we've been pursuing that for a long time. We did a lot of videos. I know we had the Awe TV that John Paul did, and we've kind of kept that up with some of our stuff that we put out for our tribe members. As far as having some exclusive resources, but we've decided to try to make a lot of stuff available right here on YouTube and just make it for free to anybody and everybody that is available. But the app is such a great way for us to get that into people's hands, because we have people that are in India that are watching it, people that are in the Middle East, people in Africa, people in Asia. We've got people that in China, they can't actually find the app while they're in China. But we have people that are in China that travel, that have been able to download the app and been able to get some stuff. So it's been astounding. I mean, we've got Indonesia on here right now. Botswana, wonderful. That's down there in the south of Africa. We got the Philippines. Awesome. And Emily from Massachusetts. So good to see you, Emily. Please tell Harmony I said hello. Emily and Harmony were part of our church. I actually had the honor of baptizing Harmony. Boy, that's been a while ago, hasn't it? It's been a really long time. Well, hey, I want to talk a little bit about why some prophetic words are wrong. I know there's a lot of communication going around on different platforms right now about prophetic words, some of them that are very public And I'm not really trying to I'm not trying to make comments on what I believe about the specific prophetic words, but I want to teach why it's so important to have discernment when it comes to prophetic words. This weekend, I'm doing a virtual conference. We'll have it posted on our events calendar. I think it might be already a prophetic maturing event that I'm doing with Restoring Lives International. They're out of Ohio. We're going to do this completely virtually. So if you're interested, I'm going to be teaching for about 3 hours, 2 different sessions. We'll have some Q&A, and we're going to talk about maturing the prophetic, discerning the prophetic, and understanding how soulish prophecy works, what that is, and how to recognize it when we're hearing our own soul, and how to recognize it when someone else is speaking out of their soul. So I'm going to hit some highlights today, but if you want to go deeper and really delve deep into that, that's going to be a great resource for you. It's going to be Saturday morning and Saturday afternoon. But this is something that has been going on forever, where there have been prophetic voices, and some of them accurate and some of them inaccurate. And it's not about being a false prophet. Now, I want to clear that up right at the front. The concept of a false prophet is not biblically someone that misses it when they prophesy. A false prophet is someone who is trying to lead people to other gods when they prophesy. If you take a look at Deuteronomy 13, Deuteronomy 18, you take a look at Jeremiah 23, you take a look at some of I can't remember the exact verses in Ezekiel, but you have these times as talking about false prophets, and even 1 John talks about false prophets. Is it chapter 4, I think? And this theme is they lead people to other gods. False prophets lead people to other gods. They pollute the worship of the one true God, and they bring in other things, worship of other gods, worship of other things, other idols that become more important than what Paul called a simple devotion to Jesus Christ. And we need to have a simple, pure devotion to Jesus Christ. The prophetic at its root, especially the prophetic office and prophetic ministry, not just the gift of prophecy. Gift of prophecy is usually in one-on-one ministry. It's encouragement, it's exhortation, it's comfort. It's something that's available to anybody and everybody that's a believer, but some, it says in 1 Corinthians 12:28, are prophets. So not all are prophets, but some are prophets. Those that are prophets, those that are in prophetic ministry or in the office of the prophet, there is a level of prophetic words that is required of them. And the main role of the prophet, the office of the prophet, I actually believe did not change from the Old Testament to the New Testament. Now, let me clarify that, because when you hear that, you're going to be like, wait a second, I keep on hearing everything different. Here's what it is. The role of the prophet is to clarify and remind people of the covenant that they are under. So what that looks like under the old covenant from the new covenant is different, because the covenant's different. But the actual role is not different. Moses was the model prophet. He communicated the covenant that God had given to his people, what it was, and then he clarified it. And every prophet after Moses, they would either clarify that covenant or remind people of that covenant or hold people to that covenant and communicate what the requirements of that covenant was. We move into the New Testament. Moses said that there's going to be another prophet in Deuteronomy 18 that the Lord was going to raise up like him from among your brothers. To him you shall listen. If you do not listen to him, it will be required of him. That other prophet was Jesus. It wasn't any of the Elijah, the Elisha, the Isaiah, the Jeremiah, the Ezekiels, the Daniels. It wasn't any of those prophets. It was talking about the prophet, Jesus Christ. When he came, he was that prophet that brought about, that went into the presence of God, met with God, and came down and communicated the covenant that the people were under, established the covenant, called people to the covenant. And every prophetic function from that point forward, those that are in the ministry of the prophet and the office of the prophet, their role is to remind people of the covenant. This helps to clarify what is not necessary in prophetic ministry. Prophetic ministry is not about giving people a daily horoscope or a yearly horoscope. It's not about telling people what's going to happen in the world. Now, that does happen, but that's not the core. That's not what it's about. It's one of the things that it does. Does God speak about a year? Yes, he does. But when it's someone that's a prophet, they're there to represent the covenant and the God of the covenant. So what does it mean to the covenant, and what is it saying about the God of the covenant? Information about what is going to happen that does not cause people to fall more in love with Jesus and know how to respond to his invitation is not necessary. It's entertaining and it's helpful, but it is not necessary. It must be about the covenant. It has to be clarifying the covenant. It's calling people to God, revealing him. And you shall receive the Holy Spirit, and you shall receive power, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, even to the ends of the earth. Acts 1, 8, and 9. This role of the Holy Spirit indwelling us and giving us power is so that we can be witnesses to God. And so when we allow the prophetic to be more fortune telling than it is communicating the heart and the mind of God, there is a problem. Now, I am not saying that anybody that gives a word over the year is doing that. That is not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that there are some that are looking for prophetic words for the wrong reasons. They're looking for prophetic words, not so that they can respond to God, but so that they can have a feeling or a semblance of control because they know what's going to happen. And they're putting their trust in their knowledge, whether that knowledge comes from revelation or from any other source, rather than putting their trust in Jesus Christ. And that is a dangerous place. And that has nothing to do with the prophetic ministers. That has to do with how we approach prophecy. But when the culture begins to normalize that, and we begin to think of prophetic ministers as ones that have the word for the year or the word for the day, so that I have some information so that I don't have to engage God for myself, when we're still coming back to the place where we're telling Moses to go up on the mountain and talk to God because we don't want to pay the price to get intimate with him ourselves, there is a problem. And when it's in that place, it might be good for us as individuals, if we found that in our heart, to stop listening to prophetic voices for a period of time until we are anchored back in a simple and pure devotion to Jesus Christ. We have to be anchored in relationship, because if we're not anchored in relationship, everything else goes wrong. And when that expectation is placed upon prophetic people, and they haven't had the equipping, the training, or the understanding to know what the right and the wrong way of operating in their gift is, there are very well-meaning prophetic people that are operating in a gift, but they're not using it in the right way. They're using it to give the people what they want instead of using it to serve the Lord. Now, this is clearly not the case across the board. It's a few, but there are some. We have to realize that. We have to realize that gifting is not what qualifies one for ministry. It's not because somebody has a gift and they can tell you what's going to happen in the future. Who cares? What was the source? And did it make me fall in love with Jesus? We have to discern the source. We have to discern the fruit. When Jesus talked about false prophets, he said, you're going to know them by their fruit. What's the fruit of this prophetic in my life? Does it make me fearful? Does it make me concerned for the future? Does it make me want to manipulate and control so that I can produce a particular outcome? Or does it make me trust Jesus more? Does it make me fall in love with him and see him as ultimately beautiful, him as ultimately sovereign over all the circumstances, and trust in his promise more? This is the question that we need to ask ourselves, because this tells us whether or not we are engaging the prophetic. Because if we don't engage the prophetic correctly, then we start to expect things of the prophetic. And when people have not had the right training, they think that the expectations that they're receiving from people are the best way to serve God. And out of a good heart, they do unhelpful things. And I think that this has happened so often. Much of what passes for popular prophetic ministry that gets a lot of noise in some circles. Now, again, there are so many great prophetic people, and a lot of them are my friends. I know these people, and I know their hearts. So I'm not talking about everybody that calls themselves prophetic. I'm talking about the some. But there is a norm in the culture that the few are trying to navigate and come out of, but some have given themselves to this culture, and they think that it's their job as a prophetic person to give commentary on anything and everything that happens. If there is a new year, they have to give commentary on the new year. If there is a national or an international event, they have to give commentary on the national or international event. When there's an election coming up, they have to give commentary on the election. When there's a new Hebrew year, they have to give commentary on the new Hebrew year. When there's a war, they have to give commentary on the war. If there's an earthquake, it's a commentary on the earthquake. And when there's a virus, they have to give commentary on the virus. This is not the role of the prophetic in Scripture at all. At all. It's been polluted because we worship knowledge. We want information. We worship knowledge so much in the culture of this world that we have given our ears to idols that speak falsely. And we are starting to be disillusioned by the deception. And now we get as angry with those idols as we once loved them. Letting that sink in. I want to give you something that's going to help you stay secure, unshaken as things around us happen. I want to teach you how to stay anchored in the heart of Jesus Christ and have hope no matter what situation. There are so many voices of fear that in some ways, some prophetic ministers have done the very thing that the Bible says that prophetic ministry is supposed to be a part of not doing. It says, and he himself, meaning Jesus, gave some to be apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers for the equipping of the saints, for the maturing of the body, so that she would not be shaken and sent here and there with every wind and wave of doctrine. Now, I know that's not an exact quote, But you can read that in Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 through 16. That whole passage, the role of the prophetic is to not cause people to follow after fads and not go up and down with every new wind and wave of popular thought that is happening. But instead, we've tried to give commentary on every wind and wave, and we've taught people to follow the winds and waves, and people are less secure. I have friends that right now don't know what to believe, don't know if they want to have anything to do with church because they've been listening to prophetic voices and they've been proven wrong, and now they're questioning their faith. Wrong answer. Question the faith in the prophetic voice, not your faith in God. And when you begin to equate your faith in God with your faith in a prophetic voice, that's where the issue lies. God is forever true. He never changes. There's no shifting or shadow of change in him. He's the Father of lights, in whom there is no shifting or shadow. He is eternal. He is unshakable. Those who trust in the Lord will not be shaken. They shall be like Mount Zion, set upon a rock that does not move. This is who we are supposed to be. And as prophetic people, we should be teaching people how to trust in God when things don't turn out the way that we want. Not telling everybody that everything's going to turn out exactly the way that we want. So how do we miss it so often? How are there so many prophetic words? And let's just ignore the elephant in the room of the election and what's going on. We'll see what happens over the next week. Let's talk about the prophetic words that were given over 2019, the prophetic words that were given over 2020. The prophetic words that this was going to be the greatest year, 2020 was going to be the greatest year that the church would have, that there's going to be astounding meetings where people are lined up outside the door to get into the meetings because God's going to be moving so powerfully that in the meetings, that God's going to be moving in signs and wonders, that children's church is going to be exploding, and there's going to be miracles happening as children lay their hands on people. I'm sure that somewhere in the world, some of those things happen in a very small measure, but I am also sure that those things being given as a word for the broad body of Christ in the world were absolutely wrong. They were not true prophetic words, but they were communicated as words from God for the coming year. And people made choices. People were even told, so this is what's going to happen. This is how you prepare yourself for this. And the exact opposite happened. Churches were shut down. The meetings that were meeting were smaller meetings. Now, God came in beautiful ways in so many places. And there were pockets where people were standing outside of the doors trying to get into meetings, but there always has been. That has always happened. That's pretty normal. If it's going to be a prophecy that this is going to be what's happening, then it should be more than normal, not less than normal. So you see the issue that we have. Why? Hearing this common phrase and listening to different prophetic words, this is going to be your best year. You're going to be more successful than others. You're going to be more wealthy at the end of this year than you were at the beginning of this year. And we're speaking to the idol of our culture. You know, the idol of the Western world is me. The biggest idol. I mean, you can tell what something's idol is by what the culture does when it gets defiled. If you tell somebody they're wrong, what happens? You're a bigot. You're wrong. If you tell somebody that what they're doing is sinful, what happens? You're hateful. You should stop it. You're not allowed to do that. You confront the God of me, and you will get stoned at the gates of the city. That's a culture that we live in. And how many prophetic words talk to the God of me? This is one of the first ways that we recognize a false prophetic word. Now, does God say good things about individuals? Clearly he does. Abraham, I'm going to bless you. I've called you together. I've called you here. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to make a great nation of you. I'm going to give you many possessions. And he told Jacob the same thing. And I'm going to increase your possessions. You're going to come back into this land with an abundance. And he did. Does God say that? Yes, he does. But he also says, get your house together because you're going to die. He also says, hey, Israel, hey, I know the plans that I have for you, plans for hope, plans for a future. By the way, you're going into exile for 70 years. Read the context of that passage in Jeremiah. Around that verse, that famous verse that we quote so often, he's talking about how the people are going to go in exile. They hadn't gone in exile yet. They were going to have 70 years of exile. The plans that he was promising was going to happen after the judgment that was coming. We take a look at James. Just read the book of James, talking about the wealthy and how the wealthy abuse their wealth and use others, and that certain judgment was going to come. So you take a look at the prophecies of Jesus when he talks to the church. He says, guys, you're doing this really good. This you're doing bad. And if you don't stop it, I'm going to deal with it. Guys, this is amazing, but this is wrong. If you don't stop it, you're going to deal with it. And Jeremiah dealt with false prophets. The whole book of Jeremiah, there's some great things that you can learn. If you read through the book of Jeremiah and look specifically when it's talking about the other prophetic voices that Jeremiah was dealing with. But here's one of the things that happens. It's in Jeremiah, I think it's in 23. He's talking about these prophetic voices that are telling people what they want. Hey, the prophetic voices, they're telling everybody, everything's going to be great. Just prepare for blessing because you're not going to go into captivity. That's not what's going on. And they're wrong. And God's telling Jeremiah, and I'm going to judge them because they have not told my people what's actually going on. If they had stood in my counsel, he says, this is God speaking, if they had stood in my counsel and heard my words, then they would have turned people from their sins and I could have healed them. But instead, whoever was in their sin, they just said, you'll do fine. You're okay. God still loves you. And because of that, I'm going to judge them. Now, are we in a different covenant? Yes, we are. The covenant that we're under is actually a little bit more stringent. You heard that it was said, do not commit adultery. But I tell you that if you even look at another woman with lust in your heart, you've already committed adultery. You heard that it was said, do not murder. Yeah, don't. But I tell you that if you even have anger in your heart, if you say, you fool, you're under judgment for that. You've committed murder. So we don't get away from these things, and prophetic voices that don't do this. This is an issue. I mean, another place, I believe it's in Matthew. I can't remember the exact verse, but you can find it pretty easily. Jesus says, anybody who teaches one of these little ones to ignore anything that's written in the law, they will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But those that teach them to do them and obey them will be considered great in the kingdom of heaven. Now, he's not talking about outside of the kingdom of heaven. He's talking about this is what the new covenant looks like. Are we calling people to devotion? Are we calling people to holiness? Are we echoing the words of James where he says in James 4:4, you adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Anybody who makes himself to be a friend of this world makes himself an enemy of God. Oh, but make sure that the world loves you, because that's how you're going to have influence over them. Make sure that you look just like them so that they listen to you. Don't make them uncomfortable, because you might lose your influence. Make yourself a friend of the world, and you make yourself an enemy of God. We have left the covenant that God has called us to, and we have prophesied to the idols of the culture instead of prophesying the word of God. And it is no question why there's so much confusion that is out there. When we come to the prophetic, we have to call people to purity of love for Jesus Christ. That's the primary thing. Everything else is secondary. It comes after that. Not before that, not instead of that. After that. Calling people to a love of Jesus Christ, a value for truth, a value for his kingdom and his ways. Now, as we do that, we're going to speak into the culture. But we have to realize as prophetic people how we have taken on opinions and thoughts. Now, I'm going to give two examples. I said I wasn't going to talk about, because what I was talking about right a second ago was not about the elephant in the room, but I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room. The election, and that Trump is going to be president for the second term. We've had a number of major prophetic voices that have come up and have apologized because they missed it. And I know that there's a lot of, well, did they miss it? Didn't they miss it? You know, it's not over until it's over. But they explain how they got there. Jeremiah Johnson wrote an extended apology letter where he walks through what he heard, what he didn't hear, and where he missed it. How did he miss it? And basically at the end he says, I let my opinion get involved in the situation. And so the last dream was a soul dream. God had clearly said in another dream that if this did not change, this was not going to happen. But then in a later dream, I saw this, and so I stopped saying this and I focused on that. Lauren Sanford, in he said he started listening to everyone else. And he quotes Jeremiah where he talks about the prophets who steal their words from one another. And how God was actually condemning that. That's not a good thing to do. Everybody's repeating what everybody else is saying. And Jeremiah is basically like, go get your own prophetic word. Don't just quote what everybody else is saying. You've got to hear God for yourself. And Lauren said, I started listening to all these other prophetic voices, and they're all saying this, and I allowed myself to be influenced, and he calls it spiritual neutrality. I think that's the phrase that he uses. But it's an ancient understanding that the church has understood for discernment. You cannot trust your discernment if you have an opinion on the matter. Now, you have St. Ignatius of Loyola back in the 1500s that taught on discernment, and he taught about that. You have... I'm trying to remember his name. George Mueller. It was the apostle of faith, some called him. Saw astounding, miraculous answers to prayers. If you've never studied George Mueller, go get his autobiography. It's just excerpts from his diary. Wow. I mean, talk about building your faith. It will build your faith. But when he's teaching about how he prays, one of the things that he would say, he would not trust himself to pray for one answer or another answer until he'd gotten to the point where he was happy for God to say anything that he wanted to say. God could say this or he could say this. Either way, I follow God. As long as he said, this is the only thing this is what I want, and this is what God has to say, he would not trust himself. And that is a process in the prophetic. If you are a prophetic minister and you already have an opinion about something and God speaks to you and he agrees your opinion, hold it to yourself. Don't prophesy it, because it might have been your soul, not God. It just happens all the time. And it's not like I'm talking from a lack of experience. I'm talking about my own experience. I've seen when this has happened, and I've counseled hundreds of people where this has happened. This is soulish prophecy. Like I said, Saturday, I'm going to go a lot more in depth into soulish prophecy and explaining the process of that and how to avoid it, how to get ourselves to that place of spiritual neutrality. We're going to spend some time on that. That's going to be very helpful for you. But we really want to get to this place where we can hear God no matter what it is that he says. If he says what we want to hear, or if he says what we do not want to hear, that we hear. And we can struggle with that tension. That we can sit as Jesus did in the Garden of Gethsemane, our great example, the one that we're supposed to be like, and say, I don't want this, but you're saying that it's the right thing, and so I'm going to do it even though it's the last thing I want. If there's any way that this can stop, please, but I'm going to do not my will, but your will be done. And he was in anguish, but he was clear that he was going to follow the word of the Lord, and he could hear the word of the Lord. And so then he's able to look at Peter, who in one moment gets revelation directly from the Father. You're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And 10 minutes later turns around and says, oh no, God, Lord, you're not going to be going to Jerusalem to die. That's not for you. That's for somebody else. And Jesus looks at Peter, the one who just heard from the Father, and says, get away from me, Satan. He was hearing, and this is what he said. He says, you're not putting your mind on the things of God, but you're putting your mind on the things of man. And because of that, you think you're getting revelation, and it's not. What you're saying is actually from the enemy, because you've put the good of man over the will of God. See, this is key to discernment. We have got to choose the will of God over it all. We have to. And we as prophetic people, one of our roles is to hold people to what's true. Hold people to what's holy. Hold people to purity and simplicity of devotion to Jesus Christ, because that's the only safe place. So we've got to avoid opinions. When we start hearing a bunch of other people's prophetic words and then we get a prophetic word that matches theirs, we don't prophesy it as if it was our own. Don't allow a pressure of people to give a prophetic word. Just because people are asking for a prophetic word doesn't mean you need to give one. And believe me, I know the pressure that happens, especially when you get a platform, you get known for having a prophetic word, and you can feel the pull of the people. Prophesy, and God's not speaking. There's a temptation to come up with something. You keep on asking God for something, and you're going to end up getting it, even if God doesn't want it. Remember the Israelites in the wilderness? We want meat. No, you got manna. We want meat. No, you've got manna. We want meat. Fine, I'll give you meat. And the meat that they were given was diseased. God was trying to save them from what was in the environment by saying no, they wouldn't listen. And so finally he gave them over to what they wanted. Romans chapter 1. He gave them over to what they wanted. And it hardened their mind, and they were no longer able to discern, and they got the wrong thing, and it brought about negative in their lives. We need to be at such a place that no matter what happens, our trust in God is not shaken. This is so key. So guys, this is what happens. This is how we end up with, and I mean, there's more we could be talking about, but this is how we end up with so many prophetic words that don't actually happen. pay attention to prophetic words and discern them. Just because there's wrong doesn't mean there's right. It doesn't mean there's not right. Excuse me. Just because there is wrong does not mean there's not right. There are some clear prophetic words. There are some people that nail it, and the same person then misses it. And we have to do the 1 Thessalonians, where we hold fast to what is good and we remove everything else. We need to hold fast to what is good, but that requires judging the prophetic words. Never consider it a lack of faith or a lack of trust in the prophetic or trust in God speaking to judge a prophetic word, to see if it's accurate. Just because somebody says, I prophesy, or just because somebody says, God told me, or I had a dream. I mean, Jeremiah talks about the dreams that people cause themselves to dream. They were having dreams. They were saying that they were from God, but they were actually from their own soul, from their own opinions, from what they wanted, from their own platform. And they were prophesying out of that, not from revelation from God. So they had real experiences, just experiences weren't really from God, but they didn't know the difference because they had an opinion. They decided what they thought was true. And anything that didn't fit with that clearly wasn't God, and they only believed what was. So we've got to discern revelation, and we've got to hold fast to what is good. And if you are a prophetic person and you're wanting to grow, please find prophetic voices that will actually tell you to discern. If you ever listen to a prophetic voice and they tell you that you are in rebellion or that you have a lack of faith because you question a prophetic word, because you actually want to discern it, just run. That is spiritual abuse, and it is never okay. That person should not be ministering. There is a problem there, and it needs to be dealt with. And I know I'm being clear, but I'm trying to protect people, because that's what leads to cults, and for at least a cult of personality. It is problematic, and we could follow stories throughout the history of the church where that has gone wrong again and again and again. You're supposed to discern. You too have the Spirit of God. You don't have to have somebody tell you this is what God is saying. You can hear from God himself. You get to discern. You can hear from God. And you want to develop that ear. And if you're a prophetic person and you want to grow, maybe you're learning to hear from God, or maybe you've been hearing from God, but you know there's more. I want to encourage you, get training, get equipping, find those prophetic voices that you can trust, get around them. Find someone that's teaching discernment, get around them. Pay attention to some of our resources. We've got so many resources, and we're trying to help people to trust the voice of God in the midst of all the noise that's out there, because there is a true prophetic gift, and it's beautiful, and it's so helpful, and it's needed. God gave it as a gift to his body, and he only gives good gifts. He does not give bad gifts. It's a good gift that he gave to his body for her strengthening and for her maturing. And some of you, maybe you want some more training. Come to Streams Academy. This first module that we're going to be going, it's going to be in January and February. We do this, it's over a year. So it's a Friday night, all day Saturday, once a month. But you can do a module at a time. You don't have to do the whole thing. A module in a month is just 2 months. It's 1 month teaching. So this one will be in January. We're going to do a Friday night, all day Saturday. It'll be teaching with some worship. We'll be doing some prophetic ministry. And then the next one, we have a guest speaker. This first one, my friend Paul David Guidry, who is a worship leader. He was a worship leader. He's now pastoring a church. He does a lot with Cheon and the apostolic team there. He's going to be here. He's going to be joining us, and we're going to talk about the prophet and the man. We're going to go through this understanding of how the gift works and how to keep ourselves clean so that the gift operates rightly. We're going to go in depth, and you're going to have time for questions and answers. We're going to have discussion questions. We're going to have time for you to talk through it with other students, talk through it with the teachers, with myself. It's going to be very, very helpful. I would highly encourage you. We put the link in the comments. Check it out, streamstraining.com. Go in there and take a look. You can take it virtual or you can be in person. You could do half and half. You could do January, you could do it virtual, and then February you could be here in person when Paul David's here, or the other way around. But we would love for you to come. We've been doing this. I've taken what John Paul taught for 20 years. I've taken that, and then the conversations that I've had with a number of prophetic voices over the last 20 years that I've been involved in the prophetic, put it all together, and this training is all of that knowledge put together to help you grow into what you could be, to see the fullness of your gift come and see it healthy, see it last, and see it bring about kingdom advances, and see you get closer to Jesus Christ. We did it last year, and the feedback that we've gotten has been amazing. It will really help you grow. It will help you mature. I'd love to have you there. So, guys, bless you. Thanks so much for joining. Hey, make sure, share this with your friends. Let them know about this video. Post it so that people can get out there, because there's a lot of questions and we need answers right now. So let them know about it, and we'll see you next week.